Hi there, Suzannah here, and I'm sharing little snippets of my story. And today's video, I'm going to be sharing what it was like growing up with a parent who was addicted to alcohol. Now, we're often termed as adult children of alcoholics or ACOAs, but I prefer to say someone raised around alcohol addiction because that language just feels a little bit more compassionate. Because addiction isn't a moral failing on anyone, like it's often a response to deep pain, deep trauma, which I now understand a lot more. For example, we don't say someone is a cocaineaholic or a heroinaholic, like the substance is the issue, not the person. And when you call someone an alcoholic, it does feel a bit kind of blamey in a way. So as a child, of course, I didn't know anything about all this. I didn't know anything about trauma. I didn't know anything about addiction. All I knew was life felt really chaotic and my dad drank a lot. So it was often unpredictable, quite often quite scary as well. And I know a lot of children of alcoholics describe their alcohol addicted parents as a kind of Jekyll and Hyde character because the substance really changes the parent, and drink definitely changed my dad. He became almost like this weirdly animated and bigger version of himself, like louder, more aggressive and even occasionally violent. So he'd sometimes punch walls or he'd get a weapon out to threaten people. And I think when he was drunk, like it did give him this sense of confidence, but he also felt really vulnerable. And I think he felt really protective and really unsure about what people's motives were. Now, he was also really sociable, so he was always at the pub. And then after the pub, he'd often throw a party. So he'd just say, hey, come back to our house. So he'd just invite literally everyone from the pub back to our house. The music would blare at night, and I just remember lying in bed, like with my hands over my ears, pressed really tightly, trying to block out all the music, all the shouting, because I was so tired and I just wanted to go to sleep. But as I got older, as I got through into my teenage years, I started to join in a little bit and think, oh, this is really fun. Like I can smoke and I can drink with the adults. Not great, of course. And there are often lots of random people in our home. Because my dad was quite sociable, like he would just get chatting to people, invite them back. Sometimes there'd be complete strangers in our house. Sometimes I didn't feel completely safe with some of the people in our house, like especially some of the older men who had like wandering eyes, would like linger on me a bit too long, which felt a bit uncomfortable. And of course there were times when my mum had enough and she's like, I'm going to leave you. Like if you don't stop drinking, like it's too much, like I'm going to leave you. So he'd stop for a while, but then he would always end up going back to it. And I remember those times when he wasn't drinking, he'd literally sit in his chair and his leg would be like shaking 10 to the dozen because he was just so desperate for a drink. And every time he did go back, I couldn't understand how he could choose the alcohol over us, like over that stability, over being present with his family. And it really felt like a personal rejection, like I wasn't enough, we weren't enough, the family wasn't enough. And that's when also I developed in my childhood a lot of money blocks. Obviously money, booze isn't cheap, it's really expensive. So there were times where the rent wasn't paid, there were times where there was no food in the house. I remember they got so behind on the rent, we were all nearly evicted, we all had to pack our bags up. And it wasn't till the last minute that a really kind couple that my dad had done some gardening work for bailed us out at the last minute. But of course it was still really unsettling. And so many evenings or weekends he would just be at the pub or he would be passed out from drinking. And I remember my mum saying, oh, Dad's crashed out again. He'd literally just fall asleep on the spot almost, where he was so comatose through drinking. So it got to the stage eventually where my mum had kind of given up a little bit. I think she'd started drinking too, and they'd end up both going to the pub and leaving us kids alone at home, myself and my younger brothers. And then one night a neighbour phoned the NSPCC and social services got involved. So we then had a social worker who would come and support the family with things like tidying and budgeting, obviously helping with my dad's addiction as well. But of course, it wasn't all bad. Like there are some really good times as well. Like I remember my dad loved nature. He'd often drag us out on a Sunday afternoon. We go for a walk in the woods, or we go somewhere on the bus. We go and see his parents. He loved gardening, so he grew onions, potatoes and runner beans. And I have those nice little snapshots of him working in the garden. Like he would work really hard on the garden. And I wish that I could remember more of the good stuff, but that's a tricky thing about memory. Like, our brains are wired to kind of hold on to the negative, hold on to what's unsafe. It's almost like a survival mechanism. So sometimes those painful memories do take up a bit more space, while the softer ones unfortunately fade, which is sad but true. So really to try and hold on to those good memories. So over the years since he died, I've started to see a more complete picture of it. I've learnt that my dad had his own trauma. He had real deep abandonment wounds from when his mum left him when he was really small. And while that doesn't excuse a lot of his behaviour or the pain, it does help me to really understand it a lot more, especially since he died when I was 27. And learning more from voices like Gabor Mate, who's done so much work on trauma and addiction, it's really helped me to understand that addiction really is such a loud cry for help, like, and it often does come from that deep, unhealed pain. But of course, you know, these effects have lasted with me throughout my life. They're still with me in adulthood. And if you are the adult child of an alcoholic or an alcohol addicted parent, you might recognise some of these. So hypervigilance. So even that, now I still feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and that adrenaline hit when I hear men shouting in the streets, okay? I'm like, shackles up, like, what's going on? I need to get into a shop, get safe somewhere. Feeling responsible for everyone's emotions, so we become really good at people pleasing. And that might sound familiar. I've had to do a lot of work on that. Deep fear of conflict or abandonment. I really hate conflict. It's taken me years to become more assertive. I do feel safe in my relationships now, thankfully, so I don't have that abandonment fear so much now, which is good. And real struggles with self-worth and not feeling enough. This is really a lifelong journey for me. I think I'll always be working on this. You know, this stuff does run really deep. It does get into our nervous system, into our bodies, and that's why EFT tapping has been a real lifeline for me. Tapping has helped me to process some of those visceral layers, the buried grief, or the confusion, the not feeling enough, the guilt for feeling angry. And it gives me a really gentle way to come back to myself, to feel safe in my body, and to slowly reparent those parts of me that didn't feel protected. So if you can relate to any of this, or you grew up in a chaotic home, I just want you to know you're not alone. You're definitely not broken, because that's how I felt for a long time. You know, we were shaped by these experiences really that no child should have to try and make sense of. And healing is possible, you know, it's ongoing. There's lots of layers to it, but it is possible. So if this resonated with you at all, you have any questions, please do let me know in the comments. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye.